much for that rendition of that Mamuse tune. So let me start this morning by asking a little question. If this was a history of religions class, how would Unitarian Universalism be categorized among the world's religion? Under what big branch would we be categorized? And more specifically, other than Christian.
Judeo-Christian.
What's that?
Judeo-Christian.
Protestantism. We come from the Protestant tradition. And so today's Unitarian Universalism has its origins in what's known as the radical wing of the Protestant Reformation. So historically, our institution is Protestant. So I want you to just sit with that word for a minute. Protestant. What is its root? Protest. Well, oh my, do we not love to protest? So, sometimes we protest the aggressors and what we think are the wrongdoers outside of our walls, and sometimes we protest one another, do we not? And currently, we are engaged in a years-long struggle of reform and protest. And this one is kind of focused on the dominant culture identity. We are being asked to listen, to feel compassion for, and rush to repair the wounds visited upon congregational staff and members and visitors who do not share our dominant culture identities of white, male, cisgendered, straight, educated, able-bodied. It is time now, as the song says, that those who share these dominant identities, like myself, to become the pupil, to follow, to lament, and to learn. There is a great turning happening in Unitarian Universalism, a protest that holds the holy promise of walking our talk, living into the power of the widest possible we imaginable. And this offering to lead with deeper love is being led by people around us who are part of our communities, who are people of color, and by those in that rainbow of the LGBTQ plus community. As Richard Blanco quoted, "Such has been the patient sufferance." Indeed, no one should have to deny essential parts of themselves. Unitarian Universalism has entered a time when we are abiding deeply those who have not always felt welcomed and affirmed in our presence. Indeed, they have faced great dangers in hopes of a greater reward, a truly beloved community. And some of those voices say, our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. And yes, while this may not have been our intent, injury too often was our impact. Our systems and practices and history sadly contain many of the same tendencies that we are on a mission to dismantle. White supremacy, patriarchy, heteronormativity, all of those obstacles to truth and beauty we know need to go. Nothing in our nation is immune to those pervasive poisons. Unitarian Universalism, we should remember, sits squarely within the dominant culture of the United States. So protest rises from our siblings within when they experience those poisons in their congregational experience. We've entered a time of listening, learning, atoning, and reparation. Let us enter this with a beginner's mind and become what my colleague Reverend Duncan Hunter says, liberated into messiness and imperfection. A history of repeated injuries and usurpations. Each year, the Unitarian Universalist Association, our national governing body, holds its annual General Assembly the third full week of June. And this year, I was privileged to represent UUCM in Spokane at that event. General Assembly is where we train our leaders, honor our newly called, retiring, and dead religious professionals. And it is also where we confront the issues of our time, whether they're focused on public policy, culture change, consciousness raising, or more internal conversations. Conversations seeking to challenge us to walk our talk and live our values more deeply and authentically. And it is this last phrase that we are living into now. We are involved in a somewhat internal conversation for our own benefit. This year's General Assembly included the poet Richard Blanco that wrote that poem we shared earlier, and the song "We Shall Be Known" was the theme song for our gathering. The 2019 General Assembly highlighted the need for internal correction and institutional transformation. And its theme was the power of we. And when this theme was announced, many of our colleagues of color and those who are gender fluid and have other marginalized identities wondered if that we really included them. And so in General Assembly, we spent a lot of time examining how we might be falling short on our mission, especially as our mission refers to people of color and those from those marginalized communities. This is a protest long in the making. Now, it can be difficult to hear so much critique about one's congregation and one's faith. But as people of faith, we have the tools to be patient with this critique. And I urge us to take some time with it. A friend, Mary Byron, who's on the Commission for Institutional Transformation, Mary Byron shared this great image. How many of you like microwave popcorn? Well, you know, it says you're supposed to put it in the microwave for 2 minutes. You know, the popcorn doesn't really get ready to be eaten unless you leave it in there for the full 120 seconds. You can't put it in there for 10 seconds at a time and then turn it off and then put it in for another 10 seconds. You have to stay in and handle the heat until you're done. Institutional transformation should be viewed in this way. Indeed, our friends, colleagues, staff, and visitors are witnessing us embracing this critique, and they're feeling newly free to speak their truth of their pain. We've told them we're strong and that we want to live our faith with deep compassion. So we should be prepared to hear and abide their protest. Many of those speaking up and sharing their pain have no other place to share their stories. The wider world cares less. So we must listen, resist comment and interruption, and learn how we can be co-creators of the Unitarian Universalism that can be. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress. You know, this internal protest is nothing new for us. Our faith has heeded necessary protests before. In 1913, sensing the injustices created by the Industrial Revolution, Unitarian William Wallace Fenn, Dean of Harvard Divinity School, challenged us to compose new religious language so as not to perpetuate bad habits baked into the theology of the past. Fenn cautioned us to develop a comfort with critique and confession, sharing, "The saviors of the world have always been those acquainted with grief." In 1939, James Luther Adams, who had witnessed the rise of fascism in Germany, he defended the Unitarian way, but he added a caution. He said, we need a theology that embraces the social inequities into which many are born. We are fated and free, Adams protested, reminding us that freedom only flourishes where oppression is absent, where systems of power are not absolute, and where we can summon the courage to create greater justice. And Rosemary Bray McNatt, one-time ministerial intern of this congregation, now president of Stars King School for the Ministry, in response to the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, cried, "How can anyone take us seriously if we have no theology of evil and how to combat that evil faithfully? Bad things happen to good people. Vicious deeds are indeed perpetrated upon the innocent, and religion exists to attempt to explain why and to stop it from happening." Today's critics abounded at this year's General Assembly. I'm going to share the words of a few of these Protestants. First was Reverend Lindy Ramsden. She shared that there will be times when we will not know what to do, when history does not always conform to the present. Sometimes we will gather in a radically changed and morally traumatizing landscape. I believe now is such a time, she shared. She reminded us that our climate crisis intersects the history of European colonialism and its legacies of stolen land, enslaved people, and indigenous genocide. And Ramsden asked, how do we live with intergenerational solidarity, repairing the sins of the past while protecting the planet for the future? The best thing we can do, Ramsden taught, is to stop being individuals. Systems change when we put our baggage aside and when we join with others. We are called indeed into solidarity across all the divides that hate hopes to construct. That is the power of we. Another critic was C.B. Beale, a transgender religious educator. And she shared these words. The power of we is this. All of us means all of us. So together, unveil and unravel the complex constellation of power and authority, of privilege, marginalization, and oppression. We are reinventing an institution not of our individual construction. And we're moving away from structures of inherited hierarchy and towards something new that centers the marginalized and infuses us all with love and hope and connection. She said, together we seek to build the beloved community, one meeting, one program, one conversation, one pronoun, one relationship, one bylaw at a time. We are required, she said, to listen more than speak, to continue to gain new knowledge, learn new skills, and more finely hone those skills we already possess. We have done holy work by listening to, noticing, bearing witness to injustices in our institutions. And we further our just transformation by encouraging and rewarding feedback of those times we transgress. And we also do holy work when we embrace invitations to repentance and to repair, to notice, listen, to follow with genuine humility, to embrace those invitations to repentance. If we haven't the courage and patience to do this, I wonder who will? Again, from the Declaration of Independence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Better than any faith institution, this one has embraced and withered protest. So we fortify ourselves to stay in this place of painful and thorough self-examination. We must bear witness to the pain of those not in the dominant culture, be they religious professionals or the person sitting next to us on Sunday morning. This is because love requires us to listen to the pain of our neighbor and to respond to that pain. So let us court their protest with glad hearts and deep listening, patiently hearing the pain and injustice experienced by fellow members, friends, citizens, staff. Yes, we are Protestants. We protest, proclaiming how the world should be, often how others should change. But let us learn how we must change so we may transform into examples of beauty that we know the world needs, perhaps more than in a long time, right now. At General Assembly, a friend and colleague of Reverend Anya and I, Mark Morrison Reed, received the Distinguished Service Award. He's a leading scholar and historian, and this lifelong African-American Unitarian Universalist leader had a simple suggestion to amplify the power of we. Invite folks to Sunday service. Offer to drive them here. Take them to breakfast on the way and maybe also to lunch on the way home. Nothing is more powerful to this faith than your invitation. He also said, be a choir boy. Be one of the gang. Work with the group. Stay in the conversation, but stay in it lovingly, respectfully, not assuming you have the right answer right away, and shape a future that none of us alone could imagine and create. The power of we. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Beloved, the world throws so many obstacles to love, justice, and freedom in our paths. Let us not add any of our own making. Let us avoid self-inflicted wounds born of impatience or injustices sealed by certainty or born of privilege. Our faith's journey includes a requirement to dismantle oppression. And for that to happen, we must abide the protestations of those among us who come from historically marginalized identity groups. Never let comfort or convenience or conflict avoidance keep us from holy conversations necessary to reform our ways and live more authentically into our faith's great promise. Instead, be one of the choir. Witness the truth and be patient with the protest. Compose a greater harmony that is the hallmark of the just and compassionate world we know could be ours if only enough consciousnesses were raised and souls made humble before the glory of divine love, that true healer of all of our woes that brought us into being and lives in our hearts. We can be examples of patient endurance in this era of truth-telling, reconciliation, and reparation. I pray we will be worthy to see that endeavor through to its completion, to the full 120 seconds that popcorn needs to be edible. We close today with these words from Mickey Scott-Bay Jones. She is a black activist, womanist scholar, and a justice doula. A doula is a midwife. I met Mickey at the Revolutionary Love Conference in Manhattan during a protest about the killing of Eric Garner. A black man, Garner, was choked by a white police officer for allegedly selling cigarettes. His murderer remains free and on the New York Police Department payroll. Jones's words were shared at General Assembly as well. And I leave you with these. Invitation to brave space. Together, we will create brave space. Because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and more love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think and know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be. But it will be our brave space together. And we will work on it. Side